This is TVA by Gemma, a podcast about entertainment issues brought to you by darkcrazy.com.
Okay, so here's the basic idea. Andrew is in Atlanta. I'm here in Savannah. But through the miracle of the internet, we're going to talk to each other about The Walking Dead. And we're going to facilitate this conversation with as much alcohol as possible. We hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, I don't think we'll get sued for that.
So, you are watching and or listening to Drunken Dead. This is our podcast dedicated to talking about the Walking Dead TV show, where we will punctuate that discussion with liberal amounts of libation, is the plan. And so far, with all the technical setup, I think that might be a good idea. It's not helping the technical aspect, but it is making it a little easier to deal with. Alright. So, my name is Sean, and I am sitting here with Andrew.
I'm Andrew. I have to wave at the camera now.
Of the TV Ate My Dinner podcast. And we're going to be talking about Season 1 of The Walking Dead. Tonight, specifically, we'll be talking about Episode 1 of Season 1. And I'm going to try to pop open this bottle without taking an eyeball out. Ooh.
I have a couple different beers in honor of tonight, actually.
I like that.
Well, I wanted to get that Dead Guy Ale, but they didn't have it at Publix.
You're probably better off. If it's got a funny name, it probably is horrible.
But I had some Red Stripe, so because it's like blood, So, but then in honor of one of the people, after watching the season again today, I watched the whole thing again today. I have a great beer. This is actually a good recommendation, actually, but it's actually pointed for the show. It's called Dale's Pale Ale.
Dale's Pale Ale. I've heard of it. I haven't tried the Pale Ale.
It's from Oscar Blues Brewery. They're in North Carolina. My friend visited there, but it looks like the most redneck can. It's in cans too. Mm-hmm. It looks like the most redneck thing. It's like $10 for a 6-pack. It's pretty expensive. And it just looks like the stupidest thing, but we just looked it up one day and it had like 99 like on all those beer sites. And it's amazing. So if you like pale ales...
Well, I may have to try it. I'm not a fan of pale ales.
Well, you know what? This is the thing that actually made me a fan of pale ales, because I'm like, yeah, it's all right. But this is excellent. So then after this, I started getting other ones. So Dale's Pale Ale. I'll show it to the camera.
Dale's Pale Ale. You should have done PBR. It's all in Georgia that they're doing the show.
Yeah.
If you really want to.
You notice that?
But I'm not doing that.
They did that with the most recent. Well, we're in season 1, but the most recent one of the. It wasn't the most recent. It's like the first episode where they had they went into like a grocery store, but they all had beer stacks, and every beer stack was like all Georgia beers. It was like a Sweetwater Brewery, which is here, and then they also had that. A couple like,
but it had this fully stocked liquor section,
and
they didn't even touch it, and they needed medicine and stuff all the way. Like liquor is medicinal,
right? So,
but we won't get to that season 4. We get a long,
we have a long journey
road between there and here.
Get to that, yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually drinking some Corbel right now to christen our new effort. Corbel Brut Rose Champagne.
You're like all swanky.
Yeah, I'm wearing a smoking jacket. Welcome to the program, the Continental. Because I was drinking beer earlier. I've been prepping.
I've been prepping
but I was
too.
Drinking some Carlsberg and some Crispin cider. So now I've moved into the white wine.
You got a lot of fancy drinks.
Yeah, really. Well, it ain't Dale's Pale Ale.
Yeah, it's not Dale's Pale Ale.
I do what I can.
Yeah.
All right. So moving into the beginning of one of the things we did too to try to set up what we want to do with this show is obviously we're going to talk about the television program itself, but it comes from a comic, yes. The Walking Dead. We said that already.
I think
we're not that far behind.
I think we did. Okay.
We're going to talk about the Walking Dead television program, but also it comes from a comic book and what we want to do is sort of contrast and compare with what's going on in the Walking Dead comic versus what they ended up doing in the Walking Dead TV show, which is at the beginning, in a lot of ways, is very similar.
Well, at least the first half of the
first half of the first season, and then later on. But we have said, if you're listeners of TV Ate My Dinner, we have sort of said where you can see whenever the show sort of trails off of the what's laid ahead of by the comic, things start to get kind of weird. Whenever you're like watching the show, that's my assertion. And now we just got you to read the first volume, first collected trade.
Yeah.
So you're a fresh perspective, because I read the comic before the show came out. So again, Andrew is like the fresh perspective on this, because I come from a different context of starting with the comic. But as far as the premise and how they start off, it's very similar in the first episode, almost shot for shot.
Well, yeah, the first like actual issue is like literally the first episode, shot for shot almost.
Yeah, it's just blown up. Like in all things with it, it's a comic book. It's like 32 pages, so they'll do something in a panel of a comic that takes them about 10 minutes to do in the show.
Right.
But other than that, they really do. I mean, there's specific moments that happen. I think probably the dialogue is better than the show. Like the comic doesn't have really good dialogue.
Yeah, that's one thing I noticed. Is like the dialogue in the comic is, well, the characters in the dialogue. I mean, I've only read the first thing, and maybe I just haven't read comics in a while. But I mean, at least the first season. That's the thing about Walking Dead. I mean, the first season's way better than the other seasons too. In a lot of ways, some of it is. But
yeah, I think that's true.
A TV show, like screenwriters and TV screenwriters are so much more mature and subtle in their dialogue. And the comic, I mean, even just Rick as a character, he's much more like animated and weird. He's the kind of
because they work with actors. That's the thing when you're working in a medium like comics where there isn't anybody but yourself and the artist. It's like you may get the story element developed and you may get the visual element developed, but when you start working with actors like in a TV show, you run some lines off a guy and he's like, that sounds like crap. Or you hear him say it and you decide it for yourself. Hearing the stuff out loud is a big deal.
Yeah,
and
like,
oh my God, that doesn't work at all.
Yeah, and I wonder, like, I mean, just how much of that. I mean, it's weird how much the dialogue in the comic actually reads. Like, I was thinking this, like, if you just shot this, it would be like a bad movie. Because in like a comic, you have to. I mean, I guess that's the part of the comic stuff. You have to emote so much more what they're thinking and stuff. At least this does, because they don't have like monologues or like what they're thinking. So they kind of have to explain everything, and like it's kind of like bad screenwriting in a lot of ways, because they have to say, hey, you're there, and I went to this thing, and just because I think this and you think that, that's what we're saying right now. We're saying everything.
Transitions in comics are much easier to swallow, though, because you're doing it page by page. If you took a scene like in a TV show and you dramatized it in a comic, people would be like, come on, like 10 pages of this one scene? It's like usually a scene in a comic is 1 page, 9 panels at best. So they're really good at figuring out the sort of economy of pacing in a comic. And I think that benefits them overall, because there's a lot of stuff that ends up happening, especially later on in Walking Dead, the TV show, where you're just like, Jesus, can they just get on with it?
Yeah, and
this took like 1 picture in the comics in this whole thing.
I think that's true, but I think I think in some of this first season, it's to its detriment at sometimes, though, because they kind of just get to things really fast. Whereas like an episode, it takes it takes you 10 minutes, 5 minutes to read 1 issue. So, like, you read through it, but in an episode, you're kind of mulling over the idea that he's having a problem with this, and it takes 45 minutes to get to that, some
stuff
kind of
they
conclusion.
probably should have dwelled on, because they ended up running out of gas later on. We'll get to it, but there's, like, a point in the first season, which is only 6 episodes. Right. But there's a point in the first season where they're like, whoops, we're out of story. Like, something happened where they went off book, and they're like, we're just going to have to fake it for, like, 2 or 3 episodes.
Up till that,
it does get awkward.
I forgot how good the show was, though. Like those first 3 episodes, though. Like I remember, like, oh man, this is actually. I mean, and especially you can tell the difference between the pilot with Frank Darabont writing and directing it. You're like, ooh, that was really good. I mean, it's besides like
Well, and
film
it's only
stock
later
and
they
quality.
populated it with so many good actors.
Right.
It's only later that they waste those actors and those characters.
That's the thing too. It's like these are the three. There's a few observations before we get into the actual episode. Just overall the season. The one I remember like that I realized is that how good it was. I was like, this is really good. 2, there's some characters like Dale annoyed me at first, like when I watched it in real time, but now I like his character a lot. That's why I got Dale's Paleo. But like I just end up liking his character a lot more. He didn't annoy me, not like his acting was bad and the writing's bad, but I think he's much more interesting. And then it was funny though, and then 2, you see how great Daryl is though. He's the best actor on the show, I think. He's the best character on that show.
He's the only one who's actually evolved because his character is just some rednecky character.
But he's so interesting from the beginning though too though. He's such a simple redneck guy, but he has a lot of depth. And you see it when you watch it again. It's like, he's a good actor. I mean, he's just he's a good actor and a good character. He has the best lines because he's so static on what he says and he doesn't say a lot, but he says what he means and he doesn't go explaining things. And so he ends up having
likable and he's scary at the same time. Like you're kind of like wondering like what's he gonna do, but at the same time you're already, maybe it's the Boondock Saints thing working for him, but I mean, you're getting into that already. I like this guy.
And
if you're a lover of the comic book, it's weird because that character doesn't exist in the comic. So you don't know what's going to happen with characters like that because they just invented him. Like he has become one of the prominent players in the show, and there's no telling because there's nothing that establishes the fate of that character.
Well, he's like the number 2 build on the show too now. I mean, it's Andrew Lincoln and him, Norman Reedus.
He's the most interesting character.
Right, and it's interesting. He's obviously likable as an actor and the character, but and he's the one that doesn't. He's the most no nonsense character too, as far as But a lot of the stuff in the earlier season, you just see he is a different character, and as before we kind of had a depth as a character, but you see that depth as an actor earlier on. You're like, oh man, he was interesting, and we did like him, and you see why you liked him because he kind of did it so subtle.
Something.
Yeah,
there's a reason I watch this show.
Yeah, and it is interesting. They do have some echoes of like knowing. I mean, this is a spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't watched any of these way later on.
It's going to be hard if you haven't watched the show at all. We're going to go episode by episode and dissect it. So,
but
spoiler alert.
Just assume we're going to spoil. Yeah, but even through. Yeah. But knowing what happens between him and Merle later on, there's a lot of stuff in the first, maybe it's the second episode he comes in, where he says a lot of stuff and they have a lot of interactions that are more poignant. Knowing what happens between him and Merle, which is like the only highlight of last season 3, I guess.
Yeah, he doesn't. Well, Daryl doesn't come into like episode 3 of season 1. It's like so it takes a while.
He's always part of the best moments of the show. And then the fourth point I want to bring up is that watching through the first time, I mean, she became a real problem for me like in season 2, but Andrea was like, I don't know. I mean, everybody, it's like whatever. I don't really care. I mean, she's just kind of a whatever character. But watching through it again and knowing what she becomes, but also just seeing, I was like, oh my God, she was annoying then, and I just hadn't bought onto it yet. I was just like, I hadn't had enough of it yet.
Well, the thing is that you're kind of rooting for her at first. You're like, who is she? Like, maybe it's okay, but she disintegrates pretty quickly.
But she doesn't change at all. Like the stuff that makes her annoying later on that we all hated is the same right there, and it's present. So you watch it again, you're like, oh, Andrea, geez, Louise. Like, I don't even know. I'm not even convinced. I mean, that actress is like a great actress, right? I mean,
yeah, that's what I think too.
So I mean, it's just they write her.
A waste of her.
It's like if you tried to write the most annoying character, and like have the most annoying and kind of.
Understand why they don't get that, because like I said again, that's a departure from the comic. The character is still in the comic,
right?
Like the character, I mean,
she's
that's
much more
for you because you haven't got that far in the comic. But the character is still alive, so like they got her so bad that they had to get rid of her. But like, oh God, no, we ruined this character. We might as well throw her out and write another character.
Yeah, and that's what I read in that first volume. She's not annoying at all. She's just she's actually kind of like a smartass.
She's interesting.
And
she becomes one of the people who's like one of the steadfast members of the group because she's like such a sharpshooter.
But but
they sort of do that with her in the show, but it's too late. She's useless.
They make her so melodramatic, and it's from her sister dies, and you can buy into that. But the first part, like, she's such a punk or something. And the first, like, her first lines, Rick comes into them and they meet her, and she's like, "You killed us all." It's like the Fred, like Nightmare on Elm Street. Thanks, Mom, you killed me. But as she goes, "You killed us all," and nobody else is having that reaction.
We're getting too far ahead because we haven't even covered. That's in episode 2.
That's,
Maybe we should take a step back.
Yeah. But anyways, I'm just saying that all those things
Anyway,
are
Andrew's
there.
annoying.
We'll get to that. Yeah.
All right. So anyway,
Dog crazy. Dog